Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series as we've been talking to lawyer and paralegal bencher candidates. As always, the views and opinions are of the candidates alone. They don't reflect me, Justice and Pieces, Trials College, or any other education institution or organization that I'm affiliated with. Continuing our series, we have Arwa joining us. So thanks so much for taking the time, and perhaps we can get started. You can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, good morning, JP, and thank you for inviting me to be part of your Justice in Pieces series and indulging the rescheduling today's meeting. What I've come to learn is that voter engagement and participation at past elections has not been so stellar. So I applaud you for taking the time to put together these series, which hopefully provides eligible voters a platform to engage with the bencher candidates and gain more insight into ventures platforms and enable them to make better informed choices at elections. I'm not sure why there's been voter apathy in past elections, since these venture committees are integral to setting policies that directly affect all of us in the legal profession. But by way of introducing myself, I'm Arwa DeSantis. I'm a lawyer. But being a lawyer was not always the path I was looking to get into. I started studying computer programming when I was in college, but in the mid-'80s, I was acutely aware that computer programming were going to have a huge part of society. Computer programming, however, is quite isolating, and I'm a people person, so sitting behind a computer programming all day and learning languages, Fortran and Cobalt and all of those just wasn't, I think, meeting my personality. So I actually began my legal career in the 1990s. I started as a title searcher and then became a real estate law clerk, and then later in life became a lawyer. Kind of the natural progression of my career. I've been blessed to have a career which has been filled with rewarding work in both the private and public sectors. I am currently practicing primarily in real estate law, but a healthy part of our practice is also in commercial, corporate, family, and estate work. I have mediation and negotiation training and advocate for collaborative practices. I've been married for 31 years. I know we kind of prefaced a little bit off camera here. I'm the proud mother of 4 children. In terms of volunteer work, I was the manager of a boys' youth soccer team, and I'm a proud advocate for social justice in its many forms.
Perfect. Now, next question, I guess, is with all of that, you were mentioning natural progression. Once you become a lawyer, maybe you get more concerned about some of the issues that are facing you, and now you are running for bencher. So why are you running for bencher in the 2023 election?
Well, I'm running as an unaffiliated candidate. I'm not partisan to any one particular platform. As you're aware, the LSO is mandated to operate in the public interest by regulating the legal profession. So I felt it is incumbent on each and every one of us, whether you're running as a bencher or whether you are voting for a bencher, because those decisions are being made about the profession which directly affect us without our input. I've noticed that in many regards, the law society is quite divorced from the legal profession, and I'm running to ensure that our collective interests are protected. I'm also running as a role model for my children, because the natural progression of my career meant to show them that you never stop learning, you never stop advancing. I think in historical careers, you chose a path and you kind of stayed there and retired. But I found as a lawyer, we're always learning. The law is always changing, and so we need to keep abreast of all of those changes. And I think kind of being at convocation, being part of those decision makings on the committees is a way of advancing that. Importantly, one of the ways to affect change is also to participate. So some of it, like I said, do by contributing to the discussion, by in the standing committees and the task force committees. And we also need members of the bar at convocation to start working together, as our roles and interests are aligned and not oppositional. And I want to make a more informed and involved role in advancing the protection of the profession, ensuring equality, equity, inclusion, and engaging innovative ways to improve access to justice for all.
Now, with the election there, I mean, certainly you brought it up there with you're running as an unaffiliated candidate, and ordinarily that wouldn't be anything different than in previous elections, right? I mean, I don't know how long you can go back and recall, but this time, I mean, we have two main groups, teams, slates, coalitions, however you want to call them. How do you feel that is in terms of, as you brought up, in the public interest? What impact does that have, in this election? And running as an unaffiliated candidate, how have you found it, comparatively, with the Full Stop and the Good Governance groups, in terms of getting your name out there and discussing the issues?
I've been hearing a lot about that anti-slate issue, and it's quite baffling. I think it's analogous to our liberal, conservative kind of political discourse. But I actually find the aggressiveness of some of the voices kind of to be tantamount to like an oppression on the minority of us. We're unaffiliated, so we don't have the financial backing of some of the bigger coalitions and the factions. And it's somewhat bullying. We're getting a lot of information disseminated to us about, don't vote for these persons. This is the right platform to advocate for, our interests. So I think an election of a candidate should not be solely based on whether they align with, these slates, voter ideologies. If you're only choosing a candidate if they align with your platform, it could be, in the end result, extremely prohibitive on progress at convocation. These important policies, which may not necessarily align with those slates, may never see the light of day. So I believe that our respective motivations for running are as unique as the candidates themselves. The commonality, however, I believe, is that each one of the 2023 venture candidates feel that in some way they are able to contribute to the betterment of not only the Law Society's mandate of regulating the profession in the public interest, but also to ensuring the protection of the profession so that there's ultimately a profession to regulate. The Full Stop, the Good Governance, these competing slates, to some degree have been dominating the airwaves and have detracted from the real issues, of these elections. I think that we need to bear in mind that ventures are not in opposition to each other. We have a common goal, we have a common interest. And these elections are means of us coming together to contribute at convocation, at the committees, at the subcommittee levels, about important policy issues. And the anti-slate debate has really diverted our attention from those real issues. So I think encourage voters to vote, not because you are, partisan or aligned with any of those platforms, but simply look at the issues, not at the slate. So hopefully none of us not affiliated with any platform can impart some meaningful alternative views. And as an independent venture candidate, our input can hopefully keep these factions focused on the issues rather than each other.
Yeah, so you brought up issues there. So what are the important issues in this election to you and to those who may be, again, as you point out, anti-slate, who may be missing some of these issues? What do you think is important for us to look at in this upcoming election?
I think the AI technology is an important thing that's coming to the forefront of many areas. I think mental health. There was some discussion about paralegal dissemination of work to paralegals in the family law context. But the mental health issue was a prominent one in access to justice. There was actually something I watched recently, one of the CPDs on mental health and how many practitioners are in their first 5 years leaving the profession. So I think mental health across many areas of society, we've seen since the pandemic, financial concerns, rising interest rates. It has really, kind of disseminated into the fabric of society. We see that people, violence is up. It's certainly something that we need to look at, and certainly in the profession itself. Like I said, they've looked at the numbers, and the first 5 years of practice, establishing a practice. Being a lawyer is not just legal; it's also business. You have to promote yourself and find avenues of great, being able to put food on the table. And so that financial avenue is certainly something that most lawyers need about five years to establish their careers. And it has impacted the remuneration of lawyers, the hours, the work-life balance. With respect to the legal profession, it certainly, there is an inequity there where we're not, articling students are finding trouble finding work. And so, one thing, kind of leads into the other in terms of, are we going to have the product of lawyers coming into the profession if they know that these concerns that are at the forefront of our minds right now, why choose a career path that's not going to be what you think it should be? And unless there is a support system, and I think the LSO has looked at this and is taking a positive approach in finding resources in order to kind of lean on colleagues if you have issues. They've got practice management. You can also call for guidance on the rules and regulations. And then, calling colleagues. I mean, these are all part and parcel of how we can address the mental health issues. Another big one was legal aid, access to justice, innovative ways of finding avenues for the public to address their legal concerns without the use of lawyers, or a more feasible and financially feasible way. But access to justice, if we look at it and how do we address that issue, it's so multifaceted. It's a multifaceted problem. It requires a multifaceted solution, whether it's funding, whether it's legal aid funding, whether it's funding for lawyers, perhaps, kind of just scrapping legal aid and starting from scratch and looking at this. Where has it gone wrong? Where can it be improved? The use of innovative technologies. And by that, I mean innovative technologies that are not expensive. What I have found in our practice, because we do real estate, primarily real estate, is we do use technology for a lot of the data management, but companies, when it comes to the bottom line, those companies have, the cost of doing business has risen. So access to justice means actually looking at the technologies which are being allowed to permeate, the legal industry, that those costs are kept at a minimal. They can't just unilaterally say, the costs have gone up, and so therefore, on a transactional basis, this has got to be passed to the consumer. So if we're using data management in order to provide better access to justice in terms of better workflow and effectiveness, I think the LSO has to kind of look at those technologies as well to make sure they curb, the inflationary issues that, that go along with it. Funding for legal libraries, I think, is imperative. I don't think we should stop funding for that. I use Canley, I use the Great Library, I use colleagues. So, I think access means supporting many and all of those pillars, not all, not just one in particular, but we've got to look at that holistically. But again, what does access to justice actually mean? We've got to define that. For you, it might mean something else. So those subcommittees should come together and look at access to justice. In one area of the legal profession, it might mean one thing, and to another practitioner, another. And then to the public, I think in terms of the public, access means access to information, access to legal. I don't necessarily know that it means access to legal knowledge, because knowledge you need that background. So we can kind of permeate the field by, reducing the legalese, which they've done remarkably well. Presumptive remote hearings is another way, although I think it's difficult for the public to navigate, because they know where courtrooms are. They can Google where a courtroom is and attend court. But we found in our practice as well, a lot of our clients don't really know technology and how to get onto a remote Zoom meeting to hear their motions. So I do feel that the remote hearings is a good way to reduce costs. That in and of itself is an access to justice, because it's really on a cost analysis basis here. It reduces voluminous papers. And then I also think that, there's historically there was a notion of, opposing counsel. That was the dialogue between lawyers, my learned friend, my opposing counsel. But I think we should also advocate for civility amongst members of the bar, and tearing down the label of opposing counsel. The label in and of itself increases the sense of hostility between litigants and only serves to fuel the flames. So I think if top-down approaches, meaning that from the bar we approach it civilly, then our clients also, they can have resolution to their issues, on a less acrimonious basis. We're not creating the conflict which already exists. We're just finding resolution for their problems in a faster and more effective, in a more effective way. So I think those are some of the main areas. I know mental health is really part of the discussion. Like COVID has just really brought it to the forefront. Access to justice has been a long-standing issue. It's being addressed in piecemeals. I don't know if Justice in Pieces has been addressing it in pieces, but it's certainly not something that can be remedied just because we've got a new election of benchers and new people with ideas. I think perhaps approaches to certain topics that are important today, because we know that law is about legislation of society today. We look prospectively on substantive issues, and one of them has really is mental health is rising at an alarming rate.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of and certainly there's a lot there, but in terms of what you brought up, whether it's mental health, access to justice, innovation, technology, legal aid, AI, I mean, all of these different issues there. One of the things then comes back to within the role of the Law Society, right? If you're elected bencher and a convocation, and you've pointed out to the committees and subcommittees, even if it's just one or two of those areas you've pointed out, what should the Law Society's role be in terms of better shaping some of these areas? What more can they be doing, in your opinion, that perhaps maybe they haven't been doing, or what can they be doing more of? In terms of any one of these areas, whether you want to tackle it from mental health, from legal aid, or funding for the libraries, any changes that you would propose or you would want the Law Society to look more into?
Well, it's difficult to kind of speak to that because I'm not part of any of those committees right now, so I don't know what discussions happening. But I think there is, bylaw 3 kind of addresses some of these committees and task force and ad hoc committees. So they do already have designated some committees to address, certain areas, funding, financial, auditing, and so forth. So as a candidate, if elected, I kind of would see what committees are existing and help to improve the dialogue to see, where's the void, what have they missed in their discussions. But I think also the Law Society, in operating its mandate, has to look at the legal profession as well, and see, what has been happening in the legal profession. There's this undertone of complaint. I myself, am a party to that, because our escalating licensing fees year in and year out. If their mandate is to operate in the public interest, how do they do that? By increasing licensing fees. We're mandated to do CPDs every year. Those costs keep rising. And it may be that instead of mandating licensing and CPD hours, that we engage in more pro bono work. That's some way of saying, instead of doing every year, choose a course of study. Most people are going to choose a course of study that they're already on. We want to learn about the legislation changes in our respective fields. So if there's a change in real estate, I need to know and be abreast of that so I can inform my clients. The Accelerating Access to Justice Act was implemented January of 2022, and that kind of cut across a few areas, family, wills and estates. So we don't necessarily need to do CPD hours. I think we certainly have to continue learning, continue education. But I don't think you can quantify it by saying you have to do a certain number of substantive and professional hours and EDI hours, that's enough that the Law Society, says. Because first of all, the programs they're fantastic programs that are put together. But again, tons of information is being disseminated. We don't necessarily have time in our practices to sift through all the information at these CPDs in order to be effective as practitioners. So I think we have to look at a more effective way of being practitioners instead of saying, okay, I've completed CPD hours. So the Law Society, addressing access to justice, addressing access to information, addressing mental health issues. This is part and parcel of what the Law Society, by regulating us, has kind of, to some degree, created. I think they have to look at the legal profession. They're not just acting on the public interest. They are acting for us as legal professionals. They regulate us, but if we're not practicing in an ethical or manner that's mandated by the Law Society, I don't think that's really what we should be looking at. I think obviously we have ethical fiduciary obligations to clients, but more so, if we're constantly being regulated to a degree where we're not actually providing the services that clients need, that society needs, I think that really needs to be addressed. I think, we have to moderate regulation and control the fees. I think there's an oversight that needs to be made on our escalating licensing, but the Law Society, committees, I think they have a funding auditing committee that would address that. I think there is in place currently a mental health committee. The Access to Justice Committee, I don't know if there is one that really speaks to that. I know there's legal aid funding. I know they're looking at ways to either fund more or move the funding to elsewhere that could possibly be better. But ways that the Law Society can improve, I mean, that's a loaded question. Loaded question.
All right, so Arwa, thanks so much for taking the time here and joining us today. I got two last questions for you. First of all, I have students hopefully are listening, and there'll be other students, I'm sure, that I'm not teaching that will be listening, and they're looking to enter into the profession. And I was wondering if you have any words of wisdom, any advice for them as they look to make the leap from student to lawyer or paralegal.
Words of wisdom. Well, that would never come from me. I think I applaud them for taking that kind of career choice. I never regretted mine, I think, I touched upon AI. I'm not technologically savvy, but I think we're all aware of this new chat GPT, and it's encroached in the legal field. And I know a lot of students are, kind of relying on that to do some essays and so forth, but, kind of buyer beware that the information that's being sent is old. Law changes very, very quickly, and do not rely on artificial intelligence. So you asked for words of wisdom, and artificial intelligence is not words of wisdom. It's buyer beware. But I think there was a book that I read years ago. It's Richard Susskind. I think it's called The Future of Law. So I would really highly recommend they read that and get acclimated with technology. I have found my career in law to be rewarding, and I think the next generation will certainly need to learn how to navigate the ever-changing waters of the legal profession with the advance of technology. We know, we know that since the pandemic, many things have moved to the online world. Regulations were quickly implemented so that virtual meetings with clients could be permitted without contravening various legislation. We saw courts close down and move to the online forum. Pleadings and documents were filed electronically through case lines. And the courts have indicated that the online world is not going away. So I don't practice a lot of litigation. I mean, we do some in our family law practice, but we know that this online world is here to stay. COVID kind of catapulted us into that. So I'd encourage all students, and they're probably more aware of this than we are coming out of law school, that, information technology, artificial intelligence, softwares and so forth are being implemented to help you in the practice of law. So, certainly take advantage of those advances, but take advantage with caution. Use your opportunities, if you with your peers and colleagues, foster relationships. They will go a long way in your career. I still call on colleagues from the 1990s when I was as a title searcher at Gambin Associates. And some of the lawyers that were practicing there, I still have very good friendships with them today. There's a good mentorship. The Great Library is a great resource. Do volunteer work, do pro bono work. And, as a member of the bar, I would say welcome. I think the practice of law is wonderful. And, I hope, like my career, it will be rewarding. Make sure that you really look at your, take an introspective look at yourself and see what area is, kind of best promotes your inherent abilities. Like I said, I chose computer programming. I don't know why I did that, because, when we study something coming out of school, we look at what's going to make me money. But you really have to look at what will you enjoy doing, because it is something that you're going to do for a greater part of your life. So take that approach, take it with a work-life balance approach. I think this is something that many people didn't really do. We chose career paths, my children as well. I've encouraged them to do a certain thing, and they said, no, we want to be a philosopher. I said, okay, go for it. But certainly work-life balance in the legal profession, we've addressed mental health issues. So if you can balance that, I think you're off to a great start. So good luck.
Perfect. And the final question here for any of the lawyers that are listening and have up to 40 votes in the upcoming election, why should they use one of those votes on you?
Oh, I hate these questions. These loaded, why vote for me? And let me stroke my ego here. Why not vote for me? I believe I personify and embody the inequities in the profession and society at large. I believe there should be diversity at convocation. The more diverse a regulatory body is, such as the Law Society, the better it is, for the simple reason that it lends itself to hearing the viewpoints and innovative ideas from a broader spectrum of candidates, and being able to engage in meaningful dialogue to address various pressing issues. So I think a holistic approach should be taken. Each candidate and voter has 40 votes, and they should decide what their values and concerns are. And if those values kind of resonate with what I've expressed here, then I thank you for considering my candidacy. But certainly I don't think a vote should be, a candidate should be voted on the basis of, their particular slate. There's much more dialogue and progress that can be made from hearing different viewpoints. We often learn in law cases and dissenting decisions in cases or things made obiter that those are very important to future decisions as well. So we want to make sure that convocation is diverse. We want to make sure that viewpoints are coming from things that may not be considered with one particular faction. So, if there's a coalition on, the full stop slate that's only advancing certain interests, then certainly access to justice is not being advanced. I'm a proponent of diversity. I come from a mixed background. My husband is from a different background, and my children are basically the United Nations. So they themselves have been exposed to hearing different viewpoints and really looking at things critically and being respectful and engaging with a lot of things which perhaps they wouldn't have done if they were only aligned with one certain ethnic background or one certain viewpoint. So I think you should use your votes judiciously. I think you should vote. Whether you vote for me or another candidate is not really the paramount issue. It's that you should vote. I did hear voter apathy in previous elections, and I don't really know why that has been the case, but your series is really a good platform to kind of let voters see us. We're certainly not going to spend thousands of dollars in campaigns. This isn't a political debate. This is a conscious debate to make sure that our profession remains ethical, integral, effective. So voting for me is, I don't really want to tap myself on the back and get the platitudes, but I think you should vote. Whoever has the ability to vote should vote, but make a meaningful decision with your voting elections, because, we don't want to kind of sully the waters and dilute just because you're opposed to one slate. But I do think that voting should be done on its merits of the candidates. I certainly bring, I believe, a greater viewpoint than many lawyers. Like I said, I've come to the field later in life. I have the historical background. A lot of the young lawyers right now would not have. Learning real estate and the real estate that doesn't exist. We had a registry system that's, most of Ontario now has gone to, is 90% online. It's 95% inland title. So I have the historical background. I also, the evolution of my career, I think, adds to the dialogue and adds to the debate that we should be having at convocation. I think the subcommittees have to hear from varying viewpoints. Varying discussions need to occur, and not whether, I have a viewpoint that aligns with a certain slate. I've read about the slates. I don't take a position on either side. I think there's probably good for some and some on the other platforms, but certainly we come here for, because we believe that we can contribute at convocation. All of us are unique. We come from unique backgrounds. We come from unique viewpoints, and those viewpoints, I think, will lend itself better to these committee dialogues, which hopefully get implemented into policy decision making that, at the end affects us.
Perfect. So once again, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me here today, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. Take care.
Thank you, JP.